Hello everyone, this is a movie recap. Today, I will be recapping a movie titled A Dangerous Method. It's going to be an exciting one. So let's jump right into it. The movie, which is set in August 1904, starts by showing a young lady whose name is Sabina Spielrein in a carriage. She is being held by a group of people as she is taken to Berghilslee, a psychiatric hospital in Zurich. She is said to be suffering from hysteria. Her doctor, Dr. Carl Jung, introduces himself to her and informs her that they would be having sessions most days for an hour or two. On the first day, he finds out that Sabrina's father used to make Sabrina kiss his hands after he beat them with it. Carl Jung tells his wife, Emma, about Sabrina and her father's occupation as an importer. Emma then states that Sabrina is probably the one for his talking cure experimental treatment, to which he replies that he already started. Apparently, Sabrina had a little difficulty in speaking. Emma then points out that the baby is kicking as she happens to be pregnant at the time. He says that he might be the first doctor to try psychoanalysis on a patient, which entails asking the patient questions about his or her feelings and past in order to discover the cause of the problem. After a few days, Dr. Jung gets called to the military service, and when he informs Sabrina, she gets sad and angry at him, saying this is a waste of time. While he is away, she goes to play in a pool, and the hair director informs her that he would discuss with Dr. Jung about finding a suitable job for her. She replies that she never wants to see the doctor again. When Dr. Jung returns, he goes to her room to inform her that he had a discussion with the director and would like her to assist him in his research. She helps him on his first research, in which the subject happens to be Emma, his wife. She measures the physical reactions of the subject during word association, to provide empirical data as a scientific basis for psychoanalysis. After the experiment, Dr. Jung asks Sabrina for her take on the subject, and she says the pregnancy is what is uppermost in her mind. She adds that the subject might be feeling her husband is losing interest in her. Emma gives birth, and when Dr. Jung goes to see, she tells him sorry. Perplexed by her statement, he asks why she said that, and she says for not giving birth to a boy. She then promises him that the next child would be a boy. During one of Dr. Jung's sessions with Sabrina, he discovers that her mental illness is caused from the humiliation and sexual arousal she felt when her father spanked naked her as a child. Dr. Jung and Emma visit a highly profound doctor, Dr. Freud. Jung and Freud spend an unusual amount of time talking about different things, including dream interpretation and their psychoanalysis views. In the course of conversing, Freud asks Jung about his Russian patient and how she is faring. When Jung gets back home, Jung tells Sabrina that he has to be careful around Freud as he is so persuasive. The duo talk about their likes before Sabrina asks Jung if she could ever become a psychiatrist, to which he replies yes. Back at home, Freud writes to Jung asking him for a favor to take Dr. Otto Gross as his patient. Dr. Jung finds out that Otto is not a believer in monogamy. Otto asks Carl if he has never slept with any of his patients, and he says no. Sabrina and Carl are sitting on a bench with Sabrina discussing her lack of experience. She kisses Carl and tells him where she stays. Otto tries to pressure Carl to sleep with one of his patients, but he remains adamant. Otto runs away from the hospital, leaving a note in his room for Carl. He tells Carl to tell his father that he passed away. Carl goes to Sabrina's place later and initiates an affair with her. He goes back home to meet his wife as they go to a building which happens to be their new house. Emma states that she expects Carl to be a polygamist like Otto, but he denies it, and Emma says she wouldn't want to know anything about it. Emma then tells him that she has a gift for him, and it turned out to be a boat that he's always desired, and he thanks her. Carl then plans to stop his affair with Sabrina for the sake of his wife, but she is able to persuade him to continue. She tells him to be ferocious with her and punish her. Carl and Freud meet with each other again. Freud apologizes to Carl for forcing him into taking Otto as his patient. The duo disagree on their views and their application to psychoanalysis. After, Freud questions Carl if the rumor about him having a patient as his mistress is true, and Carl replies no. Freud tells Carl that someone has been sending out anonymous letters. Back at Sabrina's house, Carl informs Sabrina that Freud knows about their affair and they have to stop it. She tries to beg him to stay, but all to no avail as he leaves her in the room crying. Few days later, Sabrina arrives at Carl's office and confronts him on why he told her mother they were having an affair. Carl explains to her that she came into his office with an anonymous letter and demanded if it were true. Carl says that he can only see Sabrina in his office as a patient and nothing more. Sabrina is shocked by his words and asks if he doesn't love her anymore, and he replies that only as her physician. She gets annoyed and picks up a knife from the table and cuts him in the face. She then drops 20 francs on the table as payment for her previous treatment and storms out of the office angrily. Freud then receives a letter from Sabrina where she tells him that she wants to speak to him on a matter of great interest. Freud immediately writes to Carl telling him that he received a letter from a strange woman. He then asks Carl if he knows her. Carl responds with a letter telling Freud that it is because of her that the both of them got to know each other. He tells Freud that she was his patient and that he had no idea that her goal was to seduce him systematically. Carl adds that she might be looking to take revenge on him and as such, he should not accept her offer in order to avert danger. Freud writes back to Carl telling him that it is through such experiences that they grow. Freud then writes to Sabrina telling her that he believes she and Carl were once close friends but are not anymore. He says that they should be able to handle it between themselves without the involvement of third parties like himself, and this makes her break into tears. After some time, Sabrina visits Carl in his office and meets him packing. She asks him if she's the cause of his eviction, but he says he has always wanted to leave. She tells him that Freud wrote to her and rejected her proposal because he denied their affair. She then asks him to write back to Freud and tell him the truth. He asks why it is so important for her and she says she wants to become his patient. She tells him she could have damaged him far worse than this, but she chose not to. He accepts to tell Freud the truth and she thanks him, saying it means everything to her. He asks if she would further continue her university and she replies yes. He asks her if she is going anywhere for summer and she says she is going to Berlin with her parents. He then tells her that he is going to America with Freud. Carl does as he promised and writes to Freud, telling him the truth. Freud in turn writes back to Sabrina, apologizing for his mistake and accepting to meet with her. Freud and Carl are then seen boarding a ship to America. Carl stays in the first class room as he leaves his rich wife to take care of the traveling expenses. That night, the duo converse as they talk about and try to interpret Carl's strange dream. Carl then asks Freud if he has a dream to report and Freud refuses to share his dream to Carl, saying he does not want to risk his authority. A few years later, Sabrina visits Carl at his place and asks for his help as she wants to investigate a case for her yearbook. They sit down to discuss and he tells her that when he left the hospital, it did not take him long to get overbooked by patients. Sabrina asks him if they will be able to work together and he tells her she has the ability to handle such a situation. She asks if he has found another admirer and his response was no. He adds that she was the jewel of great price. The duo meet the next week at Sabrina's place and they talk about their views on Sabrina's project. The two of them get intimate with each other and after, Sabrina tells Carl that she would be leaving Zurich to Vienna after she graduates. Carl understands that she needs to leave but he sobs as he begs her not to go there. 2 years later, Sabrina is seen in Freud's office as she tenders her theory to him. He accepts the concept but doesn't quite accept the explanation. Sabrina then brings up Carl in their conversation and tells Freud to settle the dispute between themselves and Freud tells her that there's no dispute between them. He says that Carl tends to play God, which is against the rule of their job. He adds that what finished him was the lies and the ruthless behavior towards her. Freud then tells Sabrina that the real reason he called her to his office is to ask if she would be prepared to take 1 or 2 of his patients. Freud and Carl meet at a meeting a few months later and the duo discuss after the meeting. Freud starts to fidget and he falls on the ground and Carl hastily goes to help him. Carl writes to Freud and tells him that he treats his friends like patients. Freud writes back stating that they should end their friendship. 1 year later, Sabrina, pregnant with a child, visits Carl and his family. She sits with Emma outside and discusses how they meet in the past when she was still Carl's patient. Emma then tells her that Carl might need her help. She says he has not been himself lately since he and Freud stopped talking. Emma tells her to take him as his patient but Sabrina says that she now specializes in child psychology. Emma then says that she should at least talk to him and she agrees and leaves. She goes and sits beside Carl by the river and he is surprised to see that she is married. He tells her about his dream and she asks him what it means but he says he has no idea. She tells him that she's going back to Russia and he says it's good as long as she leaves Vienna. Sabrina then says that she heard he has a new mistress and he says yes. He says that Tony, the new mistress, makes him think about her. He tells her that she was the best thing that happened to him and adds that the pregnancy should be his and she says yes. The next scene shows Sabrina in tears as she goes back in a carriage. The footnote shows that Otto Gross starved to death in Berlin in 1919. Freud was chased out of Vienna by the Nazis and died of cancer in London in 1939. Spielrein trained a number of analysts in the Soviet Union, before she and her 2 daughters were shot by the Nazis in 1942. Jung emerged from a nervous breakdown to become the world's leading psychologist before dying in 1961. And this is how the movie ends. Please don't forget to drop a like and subscribe. Thanks, see you for the next one.